Hey everybody, welcome to this week's North Rhodes Outdoors video blog. I am your host, Tory Rhodes, and what I'm going to cover this week in the video blog has to do with ice out largemouth bass. I'm going to cover some simple things on what baits you should bring out, where to look for these bass, and how to put some big largemouth in your boat for the first time of the year. All right, so what I'm going to dig into right away is the Mississippi River and where to look for key areas for ice out largemouth. The first thing I can tell you is if you're around the Mississippi River and you're an ice fisherman, you know somebody who does ice fish, or you drive by the river where you see these little tiny towns of ice fishermen out on the river. The one thing is late ice, this is my point, late ice where you find a lot of guys that are still going after your bluegills or your perch or any kind of little panfish, where you see those ice fishermen, really late ice conditions, that's one place to start looking for largemouth when the ice goes out. Because what's going on is these bluegills are filtering into these areas for a reason. They're going in there to get ready to feed as soon as that ice is out, and the bass are going to follow them. Because when that ice is out, the metabolism of these fish is going to increase compared to what they've been used to all winter long. And the daylight hours, sometimes I think, is going to kickstart a little bit of more of a feed bag from what they're used to all winter, buried under the dark and buried under the ice. So look for those areas where you get a lot of bluegill fishermen late ice. Another place that is a good idea to look is any area that's got a natural spring in it. Natural spring backwater areas, the ice is going to go out sooner because that spring is going to get the ice out of there maybe a few days, maybe a whole week or 10 days ahead of normal ice out areas. So the thing is, that's going to be able to absorb a lot of warm water. That sunlight, when you get some nice days in late March like we've had the past couple days, that sunlight is just going to penetrate that water and heat it up. It might only be a degree or two warmer, but sometimes that's all you need. So the natural spring-fed areas are going to be really good places to look for largemouth too. The third area that I would look would be any kind of area that's got a lot of wood or a lot of stocky type weed cover. Bass like to hunker right up against a big old lay-down log, or they'll get into weed flats and just, pile up in variety of areas where you got bigger stalks of standing weeds. They like to get in those areas too. So look for your late ice fishermen areas, your natural spring-fed areas, and places with a lot of wood or some good stocky weeds. Those are the three areas that I would start looking for early ice out largemouth. Now, let's get into the type of baits that I would suggest for this kind of fishing. The one thing is if you do have a lot of weeds, you're going to have to take that into consideration. So one of my favorite baits to use, period, in early ice out is going to be a jig. And I'll use anywhere between maybe a quarter, maybe a half-ounce jig. But I want a bait that's going to be bulky. I put a big trailer on the back of that thing so it falls slowly and you get that slow fall. And, they're not going to chase a whole lot of stuff when this water temperature is just barely hitting 40 degrees. So just keep that in mind. Get a big bulky jig and just let that thing fall slow and get right up next to that cover. If you see a weed stalk or if you see a piece of wood, cover every inch of it and work it slow. Let it fall all the way to the bottom. You can let it sit there some days, barely pick it up, and just, be very methodical with it. And sometimes you got to be ready because you won't feel these fish bite in this cold water. If you're throwing a jig, you would think you'd be able to feel that bite, but there's times that jig will be on the bottom, or at least you think it is. You pick it up and it just feels like it's heavy, like you got a leaf. Well, a lot of times those are largemouth. So a jig is my favorite. Keep the color simple. I go to a black and blue or a green pumpkin. Another bait that I loved using last year, but I want to find the fish first, was this great big old mammoth swim bait. But I was clued in by catching some fish early, so I knew there was an area that had a large concentration of bass. That's when I pick up that huge swim bait, and I do that just for fun. You can catch them on a variety of baits, but that swim bait is a cool deal. Another thing is, of course, you've heard me talk about it 1,000 times, and that's a jerk bait. If you can get yourself a jerk bait and just work that thing with a slow cadence, get yourself some quick jerks, and then let that dude sit there for, sometimes 5 seconds, sometimes 25 seconds where it's grueling, and just give it little tiny twitches. A jerk bait works really well too. What I'm going to talk about in a future blog is when the water temperature rises, you can start breaking out some lipless crankbaits and some spinner baits and things like that. So I just wanted to cover a few basics of some early ice out bass, and I'm telling you right now I think it's Wednesday the 30th. Actually, no, it's Thursday the 31st of March. And we've had some warmer weather here the last 2 days on the Mississippi River in the La Crosse area. And if this keeps up, that ice will be out of here this weekend. Then the only thing we got to worry about is a flood, and can we get a boat in somewhere so we can get to fish some of these areas. So that is your blog for the week. I am out.